Good evening, everyone. This is John Scarborough. Got kind of a nice evening. Sun's starting to go down just a little bit. I think it's probably about 6:30 here. Y'all can tell which way west is. That west, that sun starts to set back over there. This whole pasture starts to get shaded out pretty quick. I'm up over here on my place, up on the back side of my place over here. You can see my shop over there, and there's our other building, and then there's our camper behind those trees. Kind of got this place cleaned up a little bit. I'm actually standing on top of my tractor right now. See him up here. Been doing some brush hogging. But I got it cleaned up some. I mean, there's still some more work to do on the other side of that creek. Just kind of wanted to show y'all some of the progress we've had. This place came from clear cut, for anybody that doesn't know. Then last year we did some light disking. We didn't do enough disking to smooth it out very much, but light disking, and we actually planted a bunch of cool season grasses. Cool season plants and different types of things, and I got a bunch of videos on that. Y'all can go back and check that out. But I wanted to talk a little bit today about some of the progress that we're seeing in this place. So I've brush hogged this place twice this year. And it's actually really starting to come on really well. The grasses, I'm starting to see a lot of grass. And outside of back over in there, in that area, I mean, I've unrolled some hay over in that area, and then I've unrolled some hay across the creek. And I've gotten a little bit of grass growth from that, but all the growth from that is coming from Bermuda grass. And it's the type of Bermuda grass that has to be sprigged. It doesn't grow from seed. So the only way you see that is sometimes when the cattle trample it in, you'll see some of that. So we don't have a lot of grass coming in from there. And other than that, I don't really have anything else coming in. And I think we're going to do some more of that this winter. But most of the grasses that are coming in right now are actually native grasses that are coming in just in the seed bank. It's all in the seed bank. And the reason I wanted to touch on that a little bit is because I've actually been really impressed this year with the outcome that we've seen. We brush hogged it this spring, and although we saw quite a few weeds, there's a type of weed, I don't know if you can see it, there's still a bunch over there around those bushes there. Few in some, and I don't know what the weed is called, but it gets those little purple seeds on them, light purple seeds, and it's a woods grass, a woods weed is what I've always called it. And the reason I call it a woods weed is because you typically see it in areas of clear cut, like this right in here, or sometimes back in there you'll see it in places that have been thinned. So it comes up in the woods, and I've actually seen it in dense covered woods. Like I've done, like back over in there, you can see through the fence. So I've got a deer stand on my property there, and you can actually see across the fence. It's growing quite a bit of that back in there, and even in the dense woods. And so it seems to be a plant that grows, it's a woody plant. And if anybody knows what it's called, I'd love to see it in the comments. But anyway, it grows primarily in those kinds of places. I've noticed in pastures, even in really bad, poor pastures, you don't really see it in established pastures. So once it gets killed out, you don't really see it anymore. And I don't think it's a sign of poor health. I think it's just because it was in the seed bank. But what I really wanted to touch on is that it got a lot thinner. And even though we saw a bunch of it come back, it was a lot thinner. And the seed head never came back out this time. So when I brush hogged it this time, there was no seed head left on it. Whereas normally this time of year, I'll see lots of seed on it. So I don't know if it's an annual or perennial. But the big thing is in between all of that, there was a huge amount of native grasses. Some native grasses I could identify, and I know what they are. And some native grasses I have actually never seen, and I would have to actually look it up to know what it is. And what I mean by that is I've seen it a few times, but not enough to really have a lot of interest in it. So I'm wanting to kind of figure out what it is, and it may not even be that great of a grass, but there are some native grasses. But there's a lot of bahia grass, which is actually native to this area as well. And there's a lot of bahia grass coming in good too. So that's just kind of nice to me to see a lot of those grasses coming in on their own. Well, I mean, this is starting to look like actual pasture right now, even though this was forest and it was clear cut. And I've had a lot of hate on my channel. There's a lot of people getting on my channel and hating because, oh my gosh, you're clearing the forest and turning it into more land. And it's like, you need to watch some of my videos and understand how this works before you go hating on me for something that you obviously don't fully understand. I've laid so much carbon on the ground. I have put more carbon on the ground right here. In 1 year's time, I've put more carbon than you would ever get from the forest in 1 year. Okay? And that's a bold statement. But I've done this twice with the tractor, okay? And you'd get about this much in a year's time, about this much carbon laid on the ground on a forest floor in 1 year. Okay, now you would actually get more than that with the leaves. Okay, but I've gotten this much twice, and then I've had all the times of mob grazing. Okay, so we've mobbed this in multiple times. You realize how much carbon that is? There's actually a lot of studies done on this, and that if things are grazed properly and managed properly, you actually lay down more carbon in pastures than you ever can in a forest. Okay. Not only that, there was a big deal in Missouri I heard about. It was fascinating to me. I just recently heard about it. There was a big lot that the government actually fenced in. It was a big, I think it was about 100 acres, but I don't know for sure. But it was nothing but pure forest. They fenced it off and they put one deer in there. They locked it in so that nothing could get in and compete with it. And that deer nearly starved to death. They had to let the deer out. And the reason is because there wasn't enough food in the dense forest by itself. Everyone has this common misperception or conception that forest is exactly, the whole world was just covered in forest at one time. And it's like, no, that's not how it was. We had buffalo that trampled tons of forest down. In fact, there's even literature, history written down right now that talks about there were people that documented, generals that documented when they were coming through and exploring parts of the country that had never been explored before. There were places up in the mountains and in the woods that was growing grass because the buffalo would actually come through there and clear out land and clear that underbrush out. But just because there were so many, actual millions of buffalo coming through there and trampling that forest out. We're talking like forest, dense forest like this right here. So this is not even forest, but they would clear that underbrush out. So it's actually a healthy mechanism that's been happening for thousands of years. I mean, we don't even know how many years. We don't know how long this has been happening. Okay, so to say to yourself that forest, you know, is the only thing that we're supposed to have, and to come out here and to brush hog or to you know, I don't even like brush hogging all the time. Honestly, I have a big proponent in just grazing it, okay? But occasionally a mechanical reset can really, really help things and help speed up some of that carbon exchange. There's actually a guy, he's a YouTuber, I don't remember who he is, but his place is kind of fascinating to look at his stuff because his place, he started brush hogging it for a while before he ever even put cattle on it. And it was really interesting to see the turnaround on that place just simply from the brush hogging. So that alone did a big deal. I mean, he really turned that place around and made it into a beautiful farm from that. But I do want y'all to notice, I'm going to get off that horse for a little bit because I don't really want to harp on that too much. Anybody that doesn't know me, you know, you get to know me before you come and say something bad about the way we're doing things. But anyway, guys, so back to this. I do want y'all to see how many trees I've left behind, okay? Some of these will stay and some of them will go. When I first brush hogged this place, I think it was last year, was the first time I had been able to brush hog this place. It was almost a year ago. Okay, so let me say that again. Almost a year ago was the first time I was able to brush hog this place. It was, the weeds were as tall as those trees are now. Okay, that's how tall the weeds were. Those trees are taller than my tractor. My tractor is 9 foot tall. So we had 11-foot tall weeds out here and other trees that I had to come through and cut through, okay? We're talking about in 1 year's time, we've actually turned this around and gotten a lot of grass out of this. Before this was clear cut. Now, it had been brush hogged several times before, but it was only occasional, and then it had cows on it on occasion. But there was not a whole lot of value here. It just wasn't a whole lot here. The cows would get run into it a little bit because there was a hay pasture right there where our house and everything is. And then sometimes there would be cows that would run through the whole place, you know. And then on occasion, the place would get brush hogged. But I know good and well the place hadn't been brush hogged in at least 5 years, if not longer than that, since I had been over here. And so the point is that I came through and I brush hogged it, and I strategically left trees. Basically what I did was I just left them wherever they could land fairly easily without it being hard to brush hog around them. Okay, now I had to maneuver a little bit. You can tell there's quite a few in here. And the reason I left them is they're all productive tree in some, most of them are productive trees in some manner, okay? Down in here, we've got a clump of trees, another clump of trees right in there, and then we've got several other clumps, and those are all honey locust, okay? And I'll talk about honey locust in a minute. And then these trees right here, like right there and right there, I think, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows, I think that they are mulberry. I don't know this for sure. They're not producing. I have not seen any signs of producing mulberries at all. I don't know a lot about mulberries. I know they're delicious, that much I know. But I do know that the leaves look a lot like mulberry, and everything that I've noticed looks a lot like mulberry. So y'all tell me if anyone else knows if this could potentially be another tree, let me know, okay? But whether they're a mulberry or not, I do know that there are trees mulberries. I've noticed that this type of tree makes a really good shade tree. And the reason is because it's kind of like a passive shade. Okay, it lets a lot of light through as well as shading. So it can cool cattle down while still having all the benefits of a tree. Okay, and still allowing grass to grow around it. But then there's other trees that I've left. I left quite a few trees around in here, big clump of trees over in there, and just several trees randomly. There's one right down in there, a little bitty tree, you can't hardly see it, that I've actually left that are, let me think, they're wild persimmon. There are quite a few of them wild persimmons. There were so many wild persimmons out here, it was unreal. The wild persimmons, we're probably not going to leave in the pasture. I think we're going to dig them up. They're still small enough. We're going to dig them up, and we're actually going to cut some of the trees away from the creek and transplant those wild persimmons around the creek. Because I want trees at my creek to help hold it together. But I'm like, well, if I've got to have trees there, why not have productive trees? Why not have trees that are fruiting? I like wild persimmons, A, because they are a source of food. Even though I don't really eat them myself, I don't mind them if you eat them when they're ripe. But I don't really eat a lot of wild persimmon. It is a source of food, and it's nice to know when you're building a home that there's all sorts of different types of food. That's just a good backup plan, you know, to think about. So I'm not like a huge homesteader, but at the same time I am building a home, and I'm thinking like a homesteader while I'm building that home. And I don't think that's a bad idea for anyone. You don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to tell y'all a quick story. When I was a kid, we actually went through several periods of time where we didn't have food. Several periods. And I remember one it was either early fall or late winter. Late fall or early winter. And we actually ran completely out of food, and all there was persimmons. And I ate those persimmons. And although I don't think it gave my body everything it needed, it sure made me feel a lot better. And it was a lot better than being hungry. I promise you that. Now, I did get a little tired of persimmons, I'm not going to lie. But the point is that it can happen, and that is a place that you can find yourself in. You don't know what's coming in this world, especially as crazy as things are getting right now, you know. So it's kind of nice to think that, you know, I just like to think about every single moment, everything that I can do. It's like I want to add food to everything, okay? So if the tree's going to be there for shade or to hold ground together, why not produce food as well? Okay, so one of the other big reason why I really like these wild persimmons is cattle actually like them, and they'll actually eat those wild persimmons, and pigs will too, and everything else. And so I'm like, you know, I've got an awful lot of creek here running through here. If every bit of that was some kind of producing tree, wild persimmon, nut, something, how much actual calories, how many calories could that be producing for my cattle right in the fall, like right in the time when they need to be putting on that fat to help them through the winter? You know, and I don't know a lot about the science behind that, but I'm like, you know, even if I didn't eat them, that's a lot of calories. And it's like, you're already, like if you've got acorn trees or something like that on your place, like oak trees that are producing acorns and stuff, think about how many calories, think about how much energy is being sucked from the soil and essentially sucked from the grass and sucked from your cattle. Think about how much nutrients is coming from that, okay? There's an awful lot of nutrients that's being sucked out of there. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't go somewhere good, but I'm just saying it's not going back into your cattle, okay? If you can turn all of those trees into a productive tree that your cattle can now eat while being great shade, while holding the soil in, while dropping carbon onto the ground, while doing everything good that it needs to, that to me just seems like a great benefit. Plus, it's an awesome backup plan for you. So all the trees that I've left behind are either they're nitrogen building trees like the honey locust that I talked about. Those are nitrogen trees. They're actually legumes, and they actually they fix nitrogen just like any other legume, okay? But they also grow a bean, a bean pod, and I believe it's about 30% sugar. And it's not fat and it's not protein. So it's not like you're going to gain a lot of actual meat out of a cow, okay, from the sugar. But what you are going to get is you're going to gain energy that can be put into their warmth, can be put into their milk, and can be put into just fat to help them throughout the winter. So that's still a plus in my mind, a big plus. Not to mention, like I said, it's actually trees that are helping with nitrogen. I mean, that's just a beautiful thing. So we're probably going to disperse these different trees in different ways. So I may leave some of them there, but what I'm thinking is the nitrogen trees, I'm actually going to plant along this fence. I've got several large trees here. Some of these trees, like this one behind me, it's actually been struck by lightning. It's a nice white oak. It's been struck by lightning right in here, and if you stand, you might even can tell here, half of it is trying to die, and it's a really large tree. It's coming, it's getting really big. There's no telling, I mean, it's been there, I know good and well it's been there for several hundred years. So we're probably going to cut it down before it dies and actually cut it up into lumber and put it into a good place. You know, because lumber, white oak lumber is some good lumber, okay? So there's several of those trees that are like that along here, and I'm thinking that's what we're going to do is we're going to plant, because it gets super steep right there, right along that fence, and it's not that you can't brush hog it, it just takes more work to get it cleaned up. Because, I mean, it does not look steep on the camera, but it is steep enough to literally roll a tractor right there. Okay, so it just gets a little bit difficult. You can back into it and all like that and get it all brush hogged, but it's like it's only 10 foot or so. I mean, 12, 20 foot maybe in some places, you know. So my thought is we're going to plant a row of trees across that whole west fence, and that's actually going to help keep the fence from getting too much brush grown up on it. But we're not going to put it into the fence. Never grow trees in your fence. We're actually going to come off the fence. I think we're going to come off maybe 10 foot, something like that. And I'm not sure, I haven't decided on that 100% yet, but I'm thinking put trees up there that are passive shade and possibly grow some type of food. But I really like the idea of the honey locust because they're a passive shade, okay? So they will allow sunlight and they'll allow grass to continue to grow in there, but they'll block some of it, okay? They'll also allow the cattle to want to move up there to the top of the hill instead of always just wanting to go to the bottom of the creek for shade. They'll have another place up top that they can stay. And I think that's a great thing, that they'll be able to stay up there. And that you want to be able to set your property up to where cattle can move around on their own and strategically knock out places or potentially mob graze without necessarily having to do all the work yourself setting up hot wire. I've actually left trees on landowners' places just strategically just right to allow cattle to mob graze certain places that otherwise wasn't able to be that would be more difficult for me to mob graze. And I set it up to where the shade, it gave them perfect amount of shade. So instead of just mob grazing the whole place and setting up a lot of hot wire, instead I would set the hot wire up in a way where I just cut out their shade in other places where that was the only shade they had. I didn't even give them a very small area. They mob grazed that real small area where the trees were, and then they came out and had a big area for grazing. And so that is a strategic thing you can do. And so by having those nitrogen trees up top, now I don't know, this is something I don't know. On those trees, I don't know if the nitrogen is just in the root or if it is in the leaf when the leaf falls. Okay, so I do know that you can actually chop up green, I'm sorry guys, I'm drawing a blank. You can chop up green clover, okay, and you can actually get nitrogen from that. So I don't think that the dry leaf falling off of that would have nitrogen. I don't know for sure, but I do know that it's in the root. So my theory is that putting the nitrogen tree up top and planting it along there may at least have some effort in the draining. Like if any soil were to get washed out, at least it's draining downhill. That nitrogen in the soil that may drain downhill potentially will be pulling the nitrogen down rather than putting the nitrogen all the way down at the bottom. I don't know if it's going to work out that way or not. We'll see. But that is something that I'm thinking. So my point is that when you do these things, if you get the opportunity to clean up a piece of property like this, leave some trees in there. Leave some trees, get a chance to look at them. Some of them may stay right here. I may leave some of them. I don't know. This tree right here that you're looking at, I'm going to cut that one down. I don't remember what it's called, but I've had a lot of folks tell me that it's that the berry that is produced on it is actually toxic for cattle. I've never had a problem out of it, but we're probably going to go ahead and cut it down and use it for, we'll use it for lumber. So we probably will cut it down. I kind of hate it because I actually like it. It looks really nice there, but we probably will cut it down. So what I'll probably do is just replace it with another tree. There's actually a black walnut tree out there I left as well, and I'll probably leave that somewhere or transplant it. So anyway, guys, just leave that. Leave a few trees around where you can actually see them, get a chance to look at them, and decide, okay, do I like that tree or do I not like it? Does it look good there? And then you can always come back. When they're this small, they're easy to come down. I mean, worst case, you come down there and cut it with a chainsaw, okay? But you've got several years. There's several years that I could come out here and brush hog over it, And I've got a bigger tractor, I know. So, I mean, I can just take the scoop and scoop it up for a long time, So I've got several years of that. But even if you're somebody else and you got a smaller tractor, cut it down. Just cut it down later on. Leave it for a couple of years. Give yourself a chance to really decide, is that going to be a nice tree? Is that where I want it? And then also, like I said, I mean, you can always transplant those trees. For me, like I said, I mean, if you've got a scoop on the end of your tractor, a big bucket like that, it's not that hard to transplant. So what I actually do when I get ready to transplant it, I'll take this bucket, and let's say I wanted to transplant it down there. Well, I would go down there to that creek. I would dig out where I want it to be, okay? And then I'd come back up here, and I'd drop the scoop right over in here of dirt. I'd scoop that tree up, go back down there, plant it where I want it, put it right back in there, same shape, and then come over here and cover that back in like it never happened. Okay, smooth it back over. I'm actually pulling carbon and everything else that's washed down to the creek. I'm actually pulling it back up, and I'm putting trees down there that I would really like to have down there. So I think that in itself is a really nice thing, the idea of being able to plant a lot of there. It's called a riparian zone, and I've done some work, some videos on riparian zones. They are important, and if you're going to have them in your creeks, you're going to have that amount of grazing land. You're not going to be able to use it as well. Why not use it for something else? Being able to have berry trees and other types of trees. I'm even thinking about planting fig trees and stuff along there. Now, some of those trees will get beat up and grazed on, but you know what? There's an awful lot of trees that's out here that never get beat up. So it's like, okay, because I always get these people, and I know this video is dragging out, but it's like there's always these people that are so negative when you talk about this stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm kind of thinking I want to plant some fig trees or something. Like, oh, your cows are going to destroy that, or and that's all they ever say, and it's so negative. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe in your pasture where you've got one tree, you don't have any trees, and it's the only tree they've ever seen. And I'm not saying that goats wouldn't, or something like that. But in my experience, when there's this much stuff and there's abundance in these trees and things like that, it's not something you have to worry about as much. Okay, so maybe I won't go out and buy trees and plant them along there. Okay, maybe I will. I don't know. I do have some trees that I've bought and I've protected in my pastures. I've protected, and I've got some videos on that if y'all want to check that out, But these trees right here, I haven't spent any money on that. There's no money. I mean, you know how much that tree would cost, being 11 foot tall, to go buy that tree, especially if it is a mulberry tree? It's going to cost a decent penny. So if I can even save 50% of them, like if 50% of them survive, once they get to a certain age and their bark is fairly tough, those animals aren't going to mess with that. If you get an animal tearing up the bark on the tree that is that old, you're starving your animals, okay? And yes, I know that deer will come out there and rub it off of young trees. We're not, so I know that. I know that it's, it's going to happen. But guess what? Forests grow while they're full of deer, all right? Some of them are going to make it. So anyway, it is what it is. Take it for what it is, all right? But anyway, that's just kind of my thinking. I just kind of wanted to touch on that and show y'all our place. We're really proud of the way it's turning out. It's slow. We've been putting a lot of work into it, but we've been putting a lot of work into our business and our lease property as well. And so we haven't been able to put as much work into our land as we would like. We have a lot of plans for this, but we've got a lot of lease property, and we can't neglect that either. So anyway, guys, I'm going to sign off. I just wanted to show y'all a little bit of an update on our side, on our place, and let y'all see what y'all think. And I'd love to see your thoughts. If it was your place, if this was yours and you were working with it, tell me some of y'all's ideas. You never know, I might use some of them. I love listening to other people's ideas and the way they are. I'm not promising you I will use them, but it would be great. I just love seeing other angles. I've never been opposed to considering something from another angle. I've never thought to myself, it's my way or the highway, okay? It doesn't mean I don't use my way. I do use my way a lot, okay? But I really like listening to other people's ideas and the way they do things. That's the way we grow, and that's the way we continue to get better and better. So if y'all have any thoughts on what you would do if this was your place and how you would do it, what you would do with the trees and what you would do with the creek. We have a creek that runs right down the center of our place, and just different things like that, how you would maximize the potential here. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. So anyway, guys, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.